In a galaxy filled with countless alien civilizations, humans were often seen as the underdog, the species that just couldn't compete with the raw power and advanced technology of others. Sure, humanity had its share of accomplishments, but against towering, centuries-old races, they seemed small. That's what the aliens thought. They underestimated us, always had, right up until the moment we proved them wrong. The alien test was no different. Designed by an advanced warrior race known as the Zatharans, it was a series of trials meant to break a soldier's body and mind. The Zatharans were the galaxy's elite fighters, bred for war, their physiology and intellect sharpened over millennia of selective breeding and intense military training. To them, the idea of a human succeeding in their tests was laughable. They believed it to be beyond our capabilities. After all, no alien species had ever completed the tests, not even those who were considered close to the Zatharans in combat prowess. But the humans weren't backing down. When the invitation was extended to the human military, the Marine Corps was quick to volunteer a team. They didn't flinch, didn't hesitate. This wasn't just about proving something to the galaxy. It was about proving something to themselves. These Marines had been through countless battles, seen things no one should ever see, but this was different. This was personal. It wasn't just their physical strength or tactical intelligence being tested, it was their spirit. The Zatharans called it the Unbreakable Challenge. A fitting name, considering that no one had broken through it. Word spread quickly through human ranks about how brutal these trials were. It wasn't just about lifting heavy objects or surviving in hostile environments. It was about pushing every limit. Each trial was designed to test more than muscle. It tested every layer of a soldier's resilience. The psychological pressure alone had reportedly made veteran soldiers from other species collapse. Our Marines knew that. They walked into the test fully aware that they weren't expected to succeed. But that's where humanity shines brightest, when the odds are stacked against us. There were 4 of them, a tightly knit unit that had fought together in some of the harshest conditions imaginable. They weren't the biggest, fastest, or even the strongest soldiers in the galaxy. But they had something no other species seemed to understand: human determination. That unshakable drive to push beyond the limits, to dig deep when everything is falling apart. They were brief before the trials. The Zatharans were cold, almost amused. They explained the rules, how the tests worked, how each trial had been meticulously designed to break soldiers physically, mentally, emotionally. But our Marines didn't need a speech. They just needed the starting signal. The first trial was straightforward, at least on the surface. A test of endurance in extreme gravity. The setting was a barren, desolate environment where the gravity was several times stronger than Earth's. The goal was simple: make it from one side of the landscape to the other. The distance wasn't the issue, the oppressive gravity was. Every step felt like lifting 1,000 pounds, every breath felt like it was being squeezed out of their lungs. But the Marines kept moving, step by step, slower than they would have liked, but they moved. Their training had prepared them for endurance, but this was something else entirely. The Zatharans watched from above, smug, expecting the humans to falter any second. But they didn't. They paced themselves, used their experience, communicated without words, working as a unit. By the time they reached the other side, their muscles were screaming, but they were still standing. The second trial was less about brute strength and more about survival. The Marines were dropped into an environment that mimicked the harshest alien ecosystems. Toxic gases filled the air, the ground was unstable, and the temperature shifted between extreme heat and freezing cold. No equipment, no weapons, just them and their wits. The goal: survive for 24 hours. It wasn't the first time they'd been in hostile environments. From desert storms to frozen tundras, they had learned one thing: adaptability is key. And humans? We're survivors. Always have been. They found ways to purify air, conserve energy, keep warm during the frigid nights, and cool off during the blistering heat. Each one of them had the other's back, watching for dangers the Zatharans had planted, whether it was unstable terrain or hidden predators. The Zatharans were no doubt watching closely, waiting for the moment when one of them would collapse. But the moment never came. By the time the 24 hours were up, the Marines were dirty, exhausted, and worn down, but still alive. Still fighting. The third trial was a game of strategy and intelligence. The Zathrans prided themselves on their superior intellect, often boasting that their minds were as sharp as their blades. This was a mental test designed to stump even the most strategic minds. It involved complex puzzles, mazes, and tactical scenarios that required quick thinking and adaptability. The Zathrans believed humans would fail this test more than any other. After all, they had often dismissed us as simple-minded compared to their advanced intellect. But this is where the Marines truly shone. Their military training wasn't just about following orders. It was about problem-solving under pressure. Humans are creative thinkers, capable of seeing solutions that others miss. The puzzles, though challenging, became a matter of figuring out patterns, using intuition, and collaborating in real time. One Marine might spot a solution that another had missed, and they'd adjust their approach without hesitation. The Zathrans, watching from their observation decks, couldn't believe what they were seeing. By the end of the third trial, the humans had succeeded once again. 3 tests down, and the Zathrans' confidence had started to waver. What they had seen as impossible for other species was proving to be difficult but manageable for humans. It wasn't just brute strength or raw intelligence that got them through. It was their ability to work as a team, to adapt, and to push beyond what they thought possible. The final test was still looming. And even the humans knew that the real challenge had yet to begin. But if there's one thing about human Marines, it's that they don't quit. Not until the job is done. The second phase of the trial was where the real challenge began. The Zathrans had designed these tests to do more than just push physical limits. They wanted to break the mind. It was easy to think of humans as physically weaker than other alien species, but intelligence? Strategy? That's where they believed they held the ultimate advantage. They considered themselves masters of tactics, strategy, and problem-solving, honed by generations of warfare and superior intellect. The test itself wasn't flashy. It was a series of mental exercises designed to stump the sharpest of minds. A complex maze, full of traps and dead ends, but not just in a physical sense. Every decision made within the maze had a consequence, and the Zathrans made sure those consequences were severe. Take the wrong path, and it might activate a series of energy traps. Make a poor choice, and it could lead to an insurmountable obstacle. The whole point was to force the participants into impossible situations, pushing them to the breaking point mentally. But what the Zathrans failed to understand was that humans were different. It wasn't just about raw brainpower. Humans had something else: the ability to think outside the box, to come up with solutions in the most unexpected ways. It's one thing to rely on logic and calculation, but it's another to use creativity and intuition in ways that seem irrational, but still work. As the Marines faced the maze, they didn't waste time trying to calculate every possible move in the way the Zathrans might have expected. Instead, they relied on their instincts. They approached the challenge like they had approached so many impossible situations before, by trusting each other. They didn't try to map out the entire maze at once. Instead, they focused on small, immediate problems, solving each as it came, and always keeping an eye on the bigger picture. It wasn't long before the traps started triggering. Energy blasts shot from walls, floors gave out beneath their feet, and disorienting illusions filled the space, meant to confuse and dishearten. But the Marines didn't hesitate. Years of combat experience had taught them one thing: keep moving, keep thinking, and don't let the chaos distract you from the goal. They communicated in short bursts, relying on nonverbal cues as much as words. Each one knew their role, and more importantly, trusted the others to handle theirs. What surprised the Zathrans most wasn't just the way the humans tackled the problems, but how quickly they adapted to new challenges. When one approach didn't work, they immediately shifted gears. They didn't cling to plans that were failing, and they didn't let frustration cloud their judgment. They didn't argue or waste time debating options, they acted. Each obstacle, no matter how cleverly designed, became just another problem to be solved. And the deeper they went into the maze, the more complex the puzzles became. At one point, They were faced with a dilemma designed to test their ethics and teamwork. The maze split into two, and only one Marine could continue down each path. One path promised an easier route but would leave the other Marine exposed to greater danger. The Zathrans thought this would divide them, force them into selfish decisions, or at the very least slow them down as they tried to weigh their options. But again, the Zathrans miscalculated. Humans, especially soldiers like these Marines, knew the value of sacrifice and trust. Without hesitation, they split the team, each one confident that the other would handle their part of the challenge. The path may have been harder, but that didn't matter. They understood that victory wasn't about taking the easiest route, it was about finishing together, no matter the cost. Each decision they made, every move, was calculated not just with logic, but with a deep understanding of one another. That's the part the aliens couldn't quite grasp. They had designed the test to measure individual intelligence and strategy, but humans? We're social creatures. We thrive on cooperation, on reading each other's strengths and weaknesses, and using that to overcome the impossible. As the test wore on, it became clear that this wasn't just a battle of intellect, it was a battle of endurance, both mentally and emotionally. The maze seemed endless, with new traps at every turn, each more difficult than the last. The Zathrans had anticipated that at some point, frustration or panic would set in, that the Marines would start to doubt themselves, make mistakes, or break down under the pressure. But the humans held steady. They didn't rush, didn't falter. Instead, they trusted their process, trusted each other, and most importantly, trusted in their ability to overcome whatever was thrown at them. Where other species might have tried to outthink the test or brute force their way through, the Marines kept calm, relying on a mix of tactical thinking and sheer determination. The Zathrans, watching from above, began to realize what was happening. What they had thought would be the humans' downfall, their impulsiveness, their lack of pure intellect compared to the Zathrans, was turning out to be their greatest strength. The humans weren't trying to beat the test in the way it had been designed. They were finding new ways to work within the rules, bending them without breaking them. At one point, the Marines came across a puzzle that required them to solve a complex pattern, something that even the most advanced AI systems had struggled with. The Zathrans had believed it would take hours, possibly even days, for any creature to figure it out, but the Marines cracked it in minutes. Not because they were smarter, but because they weren't afraid to try something unconventional. They didn't play by the rules, they rewrote them. By the time the Marines emerged from the maze, they were battered, mentally exhausted, but victorious. The Zathrans had underestimated them from the start. They had assumed that humans, with their so-called limited intelligence, couldn't possibly pass this part of the test. But the Zathrans had missed the point entirely. It wasn't about raw intelligence or strategy. It was about how humans approached problems differently. How they refused to quit, even when things looked impossible. How they worked together, trusted each other, and adapted on the fly. That's what made them dangerous, and the Zathrans were starting to see that now. As the final buzzer sounded, the Marines stood tall, mentally drained but proud. They had passed the mental trials not by outthinking the Zathrans, but by being something more than the sum of their parts. They had shown, once again, that humans weren't just another species trying to survive in a hostile galaxy. They were something far more dangerous, a species that couldn't be broken. The final trial awaited, and it was the most daunting of all. The Zathrans had designed this last challenge to be an ultimate test of both physical endurance and psychological fortitude. Unlike the previous trials, which had relied on teamwork and mental agility, this trial was a brutal gauntlet meant to push the Marines beyond their limits in every conceivable way. The stakes were high. Failure would not only mean the end of their journey but a further blow to humanity's reputation in the galaxy. The challenge was simple on the surface: survive a series of relentless combat scenarios against simulated alien soldiers. But these weren't ordinary simulations. The Zathrans had access to advanced technology, creating holographic representations of various alien races, each programmed with unique combat styles, strengths, and weaknesses. The Marines would face wave after wave of these foes, each more aggressive and cunning than the last. The initial wave came at them with overwhelming force. The holograms were designed to mimic the most fearsome combatants the Zatharans had encountered, each capable of lethal speed and precision. These weren't just tests of strength, they demanded tactical awareness, adaptability, and sheer survival instinct. The Marines had faced their share of tough enemies, but nothing quite like this. Right from the start, the Marines remembered the one key lesson they had learned in their years of combat training: never fight alone. They immediately fell into formation, their movements fluid and synchronized. They didn't just shoot blindly, they communicated constantly, calling out positions and threats. They relied on one another's strengths, covering each other and working together to create a formidable defense. As the first wave crashed over them, the Marines quickly realized the importance of remaining calm. Fear and panic could be their worst enemies. They had faced impossible odds before. This was just another day at the office. Each Marine focused on their assigned roles. One manned the front line, another flanked from the side, while the others provided suppressive fire. The holograms were relentless, pouring in from all angles, each wave testing their limits. But the Marines held their ground. They dodged, ducked, and fired, moving as one unit rather than individuals. Each enemy they took down was a small victory, a boost of confidence that surged through them. But just as they began to find their rhythm, the Zatharans introduced a new twist. The holograms began to exhibit advanced tactics, combining their forces and attacking in coordinated patterns that mimicked real combat scenarios. The Marines had to adapt quickly. There was no time for hesitation. In moments of chaos, the Marines relied on their training to guide them. They adapted their strategy, using flanking maneuvers and distractions to divide the enemy forces. Where one Marine saw an opening, another saw a chance to regroup or flank. They didn't lose sight of their main goal: survival and victory. As they pushed through the waves, fatigue began to set in. The intensity of the combat was exhausting. Each wave brought new enemies and new challenges. The holograms were relentless, and the Marines felt the pressure mounting. But even as their bodies began to tire, their spirits remained unbroken. They reminded each other of their purpose, not just to prove their worth, but to show the galaxy what humans were truly capable of. The Zatharans were watching closely, and their initial amusement was turning into concern. They had expected the Marines to crumble under the pressure, to lose their cohesion and fall apart in the face of overwhelming odds. Instead, they witnessed a different kind of combat, a fluid, dynamic dance of survival. The Marines didn't just react to the holograms, they anticipated their moves, adapting on the fly and creating new strategies as they fought. With each passing wave, the holograms became more aggressive. They began using psychological tactics, taunting the Marines, attempting to sow seeds of doubt. The Zatharans had programmed them to exploit fear, to create a sense of hopelessness. But the humans didn't falter. Instead, they leaned into each other's support. When one Marine felt the pressure mount, another was there to remind him of their strength as a team. They shared brief words of encouragement, laughter even, to break the tension. They faced a particularly challenging wave that combined multiple alien species at once. The Zatharans had never seen humans handle such a situation with grace. Most species would crumble under the weight of multiple threats, but the Marines thrived. They moved like a well-oiled machine, adapting to the sudden shifts in the battlefield, utilizing their knowledge of alien tactics against them. One Marine took the lead, directing the others with calm precision. He called out enemy movements, indicating which threats needed immediate attention. Another Marine executed flanking maneuvers, using the environment to gain an advantage. They covered one another, and even when one fell, another took their place without skipping a beat. The loss of one soldier only fueled their resolve, igniting a fire within them to fight harder. Hours passed, and just when they thought they had seen it all, the Zatharans unleashed their final wave. This was the ultimate test, a combination of everything they had faced, with one additional element: an adaptive AI that learned from their strategies and attempted to counteract them in real time. The intensity reached a fever pitch. The Marines were now up against an enemy that was not just programmed but actively learning. Each time they found a strategy that worked, the AI countered with a new challenge. It felt like an uphill battle. Yet, in the midst of this chaos, they found their strength. They were not just soldiers, they were innovators. They learned to think differently, to break free from conventional combat tactics. The team worked tirelessly to counteract the AI's learning process. When the AI anticipated their moves, they shifted gears, using unpredictability as their greatest asset. They set traps, feigned retreats, and lured enemies into ambushes. Every tactic they had honed over the years was put into action. They remembered every battle, every lesson learned, every victory snatched from the jaws of defeat. The Zatharans watched in stunned silence as the humans took control of the battlefield, transforming a seemingly insurmountable challenge into a dance of victory. The AI, once the ultimate adversary, began to falter against the sheer will and creativity of the Marines. They weren't just surviving, they were thriving. As the final hologram fell, a palpable silence enveloped the arena. The Marines stood together, breaths heavy, adrenaline coursing through their veins, and triumph etched across their faces. They had completed the impossible, something that no other species had managed to achieve. They had not just survived the trial but conquered it. The Zatharans, once confident in their superiority, found themselves forced to reconsider everything they thought they knew about humanity. These weren't just soldiers, they were a force to be reckoned with, capable of overcoming challenges in ways that went beyond brute strength or intelligence. In that moment, the Marines had proven to the galaxy that humanity was not to be underestimated. They had shown resilience, creativity, and an indomitable spirit. With the trials complete, the Marines had become ambassadors of their species, showcasing what it truly meant to be human, not merely to endure but to excel, not just to fight but to innovate, and most importantly, to unite in the face of adversity. In their victory, they had carved a new narrative for humanity, one that would echo through the stars long after the trials ended. As the final trial concluded, the arena erupted in a mixture of applause and disbelief from the Zatharan spectators. Their initial skepticism had transformed into admiration as they witnessed the resilience and ingenuity of the human Marines. The Zatharans had anticipated a display of brute force, expecting to teach humanity a lesson in inferiority. Instead, they found themselves humbled by a species that refused to be broken. The shift in perspective was palpable, yet the Marines were still acutely aware that this was just the beginning of a larger conversation about their place in the galaxy. As the dust settled, the commanding officer of the Marine unit stepped forward, standing tall with a mix of pride and determination. He knew that their accomplishments in the trials had implications far beyond mere survival. They were about to reshape the narrative surrounding humanity in interstellar affairs. He spoke with conviction, addressing the Zatharan officials and any other onlookers willing to listen. "Today, we didn't just prove ourselves against your trials," he began, his voice steady and confident. "We've shown that humanity possesses not only the strength to endure but the ability to innovate and collaborate even in the most dire of circumstances. We are not merely a species defined by our flaws, we are a species defined by our capacity to adapt and grow." The Zatharan officials exchanged glances, their expressions revealing a mixture of respect and realization. They had come to see humanity as a simple, primitive race, but now they had witnessed a different side, one filled with potential and ingenuity. The commanding officer continued, emphasizing the importance of unity among species rather than dominance. "We may come from different worlds, but it is our shared experiences and willingness to learn from one another that will drive us forward. Imagine a future where our strengths complement one another. That future begins now." He had touched upon a key point that had been lost in the echoes of war, the idea of collaboration. Many of the Zatharan leaders were warriors at heart, accustomed to a culture that valued strength and hierarchy above all else. However, what they had witnessed in the Marines was something far more powerful, the strength of diversity, of teamwork, and of mutual respect. With every passing moment, the Marines stood tall, their resolve unyielding. They knew their victories in the trials were not merely accolades to be worn. They were symbols of the larger fight for respect and acknowledgement on the galactic stage. The Zatharan leaders realized this as well, and for the first time, the conversation shifted from mere competition to the possibility of cooperation. As discussions began to take shape, the Zatharans invited the Marines to elaborate on their tactics and strategies. They sought insights into how humans approach challenges and adapted to rapidly changing environments. The Zatharan scholars, once arrogant in their assumptions of superiority, now gathered around the Marines with genuine curiosity. This was a new dawn, a willingness to learn rather than to conquer. The commanding officer spoke about the importance of psychological resilience and teamwork. "We've fought battles not just with weapons but with our minds. We recognize that every soldier on the battlefield is not only an asset but also a part of a larger family. In our struggles, we find strength in one another, in our shared purpose." As the discussion progressed, the Zatharans began to share their own experiences, revealing that they too had faced challenges of adaptation and change. Their civilization had evolved over time, learning from both their failures and successes. The acknowledgement of mutual growth opened doors to new alliances and discussions on future collaborations. Within the hours that followed, plans for joint training exercises and cultural exchanges were laid out. The Zatharans expressed a desire to understand human technology and tactics, while the Marines were keen to learn about Zatharan engineering and strategic warfare. This was no longer about superiority, but about pooling knowledge for a common goal. The tone of the entire atmosphere had shifted dramatically. What started as a competition fueled by distrust and arrogance transformed into a collaboration rooted in respect and curiosity. Both sides began to see the value in each other's strengths, recognizing that together they could face the greater threats lurking in the galaxy. As the Marines prepared to depart the arena, the commanding officer extended an invitation to the Zatharans. "Let us not end this discussion here. Let us create a future where we stand side by side. We've proven that humanity can stand tall against challenges, but imagine the heights we can reach when we combine our strengths." The Zatharan officials nodded in agreement, their expressions reflecting the realization that this moment was pivotal. They had encountered something they had not anticipated, a human spirit that thrived on collaboration rather than competition. The Marines left the arena with a profound sense of accomplishment, but their minds were already focused on the future. They had achieved victory in the trials, but the real test lay ahead, the challenge of forging a new relationship with the Zatharan civilization, one built on cooperation rather than animosity. In the days that followed, news of the trials spread across the galaxy. The story of the human Marines who faced down impossible odds began to circulate, but more importantly, it was the story of a new alliance that captured the attention of interstellar communities. As the narrative shifted, so too did perceptions of humanity. No longer were they seen as a mere footnote in the annals of the galaxy. They became players on a much larger stage. While there would always be challenges ahead, the Marines had laid the groundwork for a partnership that promised mutual growth. The discussions of joint training programs transformed into plans for collaborative missions, with the potential for shared technologies to improve both civilizations. The bonds formed in the trials had sown the seeds for something greater, an alliance that could withstand the test of time. And so, the Marines returned home, their spirits high and their hearts full of hope. They had entered the trials as mere representatives of humanity, but they emerged as ambassadors for a new age, one where cooperation triumphed over conflict, and where different species could come together to forge a future filled with possibility. In the grand tapestry of the universe, their actions echoed far and wide, serving as a testament to the indomitable human spirit and its relentless pursuit of understanding, connection, and unity. It was a new chapter, one where humanity no longer fought just for survival but for collaboration, respect, and a brighter future together with their newfound allies.